Zack Snyder's Superman finds a replica of himself in James Gunn's iteration as fans claim it's too little, too late to validate Snyder's vision now. Welcome to Stats In. If you're just joining us, please subscribe and don't forget to turn on notifications bell for more VD. However, such a radical vision of an alternate reality was ahead of its time. The grim dark reality of the world around us colored the perceptions of Superman and Batman, two heroes who are guided by the principle to never kill or be corrupted, no matter how broken or beaten down they may be. As such, the fans of DC could not comprehend such a twisted version of a gun-toting Batman who intentionally maimed, tortured, and terrorized his victims. Now that James Gunn is bringing his own version of a broken and beaten-down Superman, fans are looking back at Zack Snyder and Henry Cavill's era that began it all, before going down in flames. When Zack Snyder launched the DCU, momentum shifted within the superhero universe, which could have changed how we view films today. The rough-and-tumble world of heroes, villains, gods, and monsters threw DC for a loop, making us dig deeper into our psyche and question the laws of morality when evil knows no bounds and justice is merely an impossible dream. James Gunn's Superman walks a similar path, or at least it seems so based on what the trailer insinuates. While David Corenswet makes his way through a mob of angry people despite having flags raised in his name, a similar scene comes to mind from Zack Snyder's Batman v Superman film that made the Man of Steel feel the insidious wrath of the people that he failed to protect. One of the many aspects of Zack Snyder's Justice League, director's cut, that the director did right by was the impeccable cinematography of the film. The stellar visual of the otherworldly film was further supported by the reimagined version of Superman and Batman, represented by Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. The two films complement one another in a perfect symphony. While gods waged their war in the sky, chaos and destruction reigned on the mortals below. The dark tones of blue and gray that covered the screens made it all the more chilling when Cavill's Superman was raised upon a pedestal only to be mocked and torn down later as a false god. James Gunn's DC Revolution begins with Superman in a film that will herald the launch of an era for the studio and the comic book franchise. David Corenswet takes up the mantle from Henry Cavill as the titular Kryptonian and pretty much showers the world with hope, optimism, and kindness while also being faced with much angst and ridicule from the people around him. But while some fans are busy drawing comparisons between Zack Snyder's version of Superman and the one reimagined by James Gunn, others find it cruel that the vocal support towards Snyder's universe of heroes was missing when it was needed the most. The moments from Snyder's Justice League trilogy that made the DCU so incendiary in its totality filtered down and made their way into James Gunn's Superman. But for the fans of the controversial DCU trilogy, the validation and appreciation for Snyder's original vision is simply too little, too late. Zack Snyder's era has now passed on, and the director was more than happy to accept what fate had in store for DC. In the aftermath of the release of Superman's trailer, Snyder called for an official end to the restoration of his universe, claiming Gunn's trailer had too much sauce anyway. If the world hadn't been divided by its hatred against the Snyderverse for wanting to imagine a fictional world set in an alternate reality, perhaps the fans could have still gotten the entire 5-part DCU series as a masterful work of creative achievement. Christopher Nolan shielded Zack Snyder from watching Justice League. Discover the tragic story, fan movement, and the triumph of the Snyder Cut. Welcome to Stats In. If you're just joining us, please subscribe and don't forget to turn on notifications bell for more VD. Their creative pursuits have also led to camaraderie between the two, and amid the chaos of one film's production, Nolan stepped in to shield Snyder from unnecessary heartbreak. This story is about one of the darkest chapters of DC that occurred in real life, becoming a saga of tragedy and eventually rebuilding. Christopher Nolan and Zack Snyder are both titans of modern cinema and have immensely contributed to the superhero genre. The former is still celebrated for his Dark Knight trilogy, which was revolutionary, while the latter is known for infusing larger-than-life visuals with gritty storytelling. As per reports, the director's wife, Deborah Snyder, attended a private screening and watched the movie alongside Christopher Nolan, who was an executive producer of the film, via Vanity Fair. The experience was far from decent because she recounted the aftermath, stating, "They came and they just said, 'You can never see that movie.'" Zack Snyder had to step away from the 2017 Justice League due to a devastating personal tragedy. The absence of his creative force turned the movie into a lackluster, confusing, and boring experience. Warner Brothers had entrusted Joss Whedon in the absence of Snyder, and the hastily reworked version was rejected by fans and critics alike. Snyder had to leave the movie because his family was struck with the most painful grief that one could ever experience. His daughter, Autumn Snyder, had taken her own life in 2017, which left everyone shattered. The studio's demands kept increasing, and he did not want to be more drained in the process. As per reports, the director's wife, Deborah Snyder, attended a private screening and watched the movie alongside Christopher Nolan, who was an executive producer of the film, via Vanity Fair. The experience was far from decent because she recounted the aftermath, stating, "They came and they just said, 'You can never see that movie.'" Fans rebelled and campaigned tirelessly, in an attempt to push the studio into releasing Snyder's original vision. Finally, in 2021, all their efforts paid off, and the 4-hour-long Snyder Cut was released on HBO Max. The director dedicated his film to Autumn, stating that, without her, this absolutely would not have happened. His exit was framed to be voluntary, but the director clarified that the circumstances were far more complicated. Viewers were disappointed to see the movie underperform in all aspects, and the demand for #SnyderCut became a relentless movement. Zack Snyder talked about how Warner Brothers had 2 mandates that he had to follow while making Justice League, but it was paradoxical in nature. Welcome to Stats In. If you're just joining us, please subscribe and don't forget to turn on notifications bell for more VED. It was a mandate that Snyder understood was necessary. However, the director is known for his slow world-building style and for taking things to extreme levels through macro shots and a linear plotline. Well, Snyder was quite frustrated when Warner Brothers ordered him to finish the whole movie in 2 hours. Warner Brothers loves 2 things: short-length films and humor. Unfortunately for veteran director Zack Snyder, that seemed to be a tricky subject when he was working on his version of Justice League. Although it could be done, Snyder stated that for just the storyline, he would have to ignore the comedic scenes, the minor subplots, and some of the elements of the larger world-building that he planned to keep in the movie. Starring Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, Gal Gadot, Ezra Miller, Ray Fisher, and Jason Momoa in leading roles, it was a hard effort to wrap the whole thing up within 2 hours. When personal tragedy struck, Zack Snyder had to leave the project, which was later overtaken by Marvel director Joss Whedon. In an interview with Vanity Fair, Snyder recalled his frustration with WB and how he did not like the mandates at all. There was a mandate from Tsujihara that the movie be 2 hours long. He further continued, although they had stepped out of the picture, Snyder wanted to see his version of the movie come to life. The director remembers that he had one conversation with Joss Whedon during the whole ordeal. After that, he was simply done. "How am I supposed to introduce 6 characters and an alien with potential for world domination in 2 hours? I mean, I can do it, it can be done." Clearly, it was done, referring to Joss Whedon's version. In 2017, Autumn Snyder, the daughter of Zack Snyder, committed suicide, and the 300 director had to step away from Justice League to be with his family during that time. During the time of grief and consolation, the director would often get calls about his upcoming film. Although he wanted to bring his vision to life, Snyder was also losing a mental battle. In need of a break from all of it, Zack and Deborah Snyder, his wife, called it quits with the production house. As per his interview with Vanity Fair, he wasn't in a